Good morning, everybody. How you guys doing? Have you woke? Are you guys woke? Can't say that in Florida, but are you woke? All right, good. I'm talking about, are you awake this morning? By the way, Pam is one of my favorite people in the whole world. Again, I'm Pastor Q from the Church Without Walls, Skid Row. Today, on August 11th, we are celebrating our 17th year anniversary of the Church Without Walls. And I was surprised when I walked in to see Naomi, because Naomi is one of our worship leaders. And you know what I do, being an ex-Virgin Records hip hop artist, we like to freestyle. So I'm going to put Naomi on the spot to come up and set the mood with a little bit of spiritual art. Naomi, she didn't know she was going to do this, but I made sure I break them out of all the shyness because they never know when I'm going to call them to do something in front of a bunch of people. What you got for us, then?
I don't have a clue.
Give us the whole hint. Give us something.
I think this is the one when you came up and said to me, "Oh, my God, you were saying," I said, "I think I know which one." I thought you were going to ask for this one specifically. Yeah. This is one of Pastor Q's favorites. So if you know this song, please feel free. I would love for you to join and sing with me too. This is going to be, we're going to sing something about the name Jesus. Something about the name Jesus. Something about the name Jesus. It is the sweetest name I know. Oh, how I love the name Jesus. Oh, how I love your name, Jesus. 'Cause it's the sweetest name I know. People think I'm crazy, and I can't explain the power that I feel when I call upon his name. I feel the holy fire running up in my bones. When the Holy Ghost is moving, you know he won't leave us alone. And that's why we sing something about the name Jesus. Something about the name Jesus. It is the sweetest name I know. Oh, how I love the name Jesus. Oh, how I love his name, Jesus, 'cause it's the sweetest name I know.
Doesn't Naomi have one of the sweetest voices? Every time she sings that, I get ready to preach. You see if I can get the slides to come up here. I think we're on. So I pastor at the Church Without Walls, Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles for the past 17 years. Now, Skid Row, there's about 4,000 people who are unhoused, who live on the streets. We call it the houseless capital. There are about 9,000 people who are housed. So it's actually a community. And most people don't know that. When they think about Skid Row, they think about just unhoused people or houseless folks. But they don't know that it's actually a community. Actually, Skid Row goes back to the second great migration. the second great migration, where folks would migrate from the South, fleeing the KKK and Jim Crow, also seeking housing. If you were in Florida, they would also seeking jobs. If you were in Florida, they would leave out the first part and just say they were looking for jobs. That's why they left, right? But they were fleeing from the KKK and all of that. It had just 1865. They had just been set free from plantations and chains. Many of them migrated into South Central Los Angeles. Central Avenue runs from South Central all the way into Little Tokyo in downtown Los Angeles. Little Tokyo actually at one time was called Bronzeville, because after the Japanese were sent into internment camps, because there was a housing crisis in the 1940s. There was a housing crisis. Black folks from South Central migrated down into Little Tokyo. Little Tokyo was called, to occupy the housing, Little Tokyo was called Bronzeville at the time, bronze for how I look. And so jazz in Los Angeles actually emerged between First Street and Fifth Street on Central Avenue. First place in Los Angeles where jazz emerged, because wherever Black folks go, we all bring what we do where we go. Amen. Amen. And so that's where the housing crisis comes. It was exacerbated during deindustrialization, right? And so because of the deindustrialization, more Black folks started losing housing. That's why whenever you hear the statistics of houseless folks, 40% of the nation's houseless people are Black, 40% of California's houseless people are Black, almost 40% of Los Angeles houseless people are Black, almost 70% of the folks from Skid Row, houseless folks, are Black. The United Nations came to Skid Row twice and said there's more restroom access in a Syrian refugee than in Skid Row. So now that I've dismantled all of your preconceptions about Skid Row, that people say the reason folks are houseless because they're on drugs or they're mentally ill, only 30% of the folks who are on the streets fit that category. 70% are houseless because of income inequality and housing unavailability. Number 3, poverty, which can kind of interact with those others. And so our work, there's so much work that we've had to do throughout the years, and I'm going to go back a little bit and just give a quick synopsis. So this is where we meet, the Church Without Walls outside. For the past 17 years, we feed folks every Friday night after service. I tell them, if you don't want to hear the service, leave and come back when it's time for food, because I'm not here to really convert you to my faith. If you like my faith and want to join my faith, fine, but I'm not here to try to switch and bait anything. We're just here to serve. This is Ko and Naomi. You just heard Naomi sing, our worship team. Ko, I think, is on his way, coming soon. At least 14 unhoused folks froze to death in LA. I believe that was 2022. 5 people die on the streets of Skid Row every single day due to houselessness. 5 people every single day. This is a vigil we did for houseless folks in Echo Park. In 2015, we declared a state of emergency in Skid Row because the city and the county and the state said it was not a state of emergency. We defied that and we declared a state of emergency. I got the community together and the LA Times covered it. And then 6 years later, we have a mayor who declares a state of emergency. So we like to say the Church Without Walls is also prophetic. Come on now, somebody in here, can I get an amen? And this is one of the work that we do. This is Stephanie and Valerie Vargas, their loved one their nephew was killed by LA Sheriff. One of them, the LA Sheriff, the gang is called, their deputy gangs in the LA Sheriff Department. One of them is called the Banditos, and it is believed that he was killed by one of the Banditos. And so we're standing with newly elected council member Eunice Hernandez and Lola Smallwood, one of the few Black women that was ever elected to the state of to the state of California Senate this year in the past election. This is us calling for the resignation. Nuri Martinez, when the tapes came out, this was seen 56,000 times around the nation, that city council meeting, and we really stopped them from doing business as usual. This is a LA Federation breakfast. I don't know why I put that on there. This is some of the work we do with the Black Jewish Justice Alliance. We have the King Heschel Forum, and we were talking about countering white supremacy. And then this is Measure A, first measure in the country. Beside, there's only one other place, but Measure A actually passed with 72% of the vote. And it was a measure that would hold the sheriff department accountable. A measure that would hold the sheriff department accountable. That measure got more votes than the governor of California. Come on now. So this measure, basically what happens is it gives the Board of Supervisors, which are 5 women, and the sheriff said to us, I don't answer to you guys. I don't answer to the Board of Supervisors. I don't answer to nobody but the state attorney general. And when he said that to us, I said, we got something for you. So we went ahead and changed the county charter that would allow, because he was only answerable to the attorney general of the state of California. We changed the city's charter. And of course, we would need to do it with a majority of the vote of the county. So we did our underground organizing and actually got him. Not only did the measure pass, but he lost his election. And he's like, women can't tell me what to do. Five of these, and he was doing crazy, just misogynistic type of stuff as it related to the Board of Supervisors. This is when Kanye West said anti-Semitic things about the Jewish community. And then came to Skid Row and dropped off White Lives Matter shirt in response. And we called him out. And then this is on Dr. Phil speaking against his comments about the Jewish community. And this, I am everywhere, huh? This is when Keenan Anderson was killed in Venice. So we did a protest then. And this is Kale. Say hello to Kale. Kale is our music director at the Church Without Walls and also our program director at Creating Justice Healing Center. We'll talk more about that. This is Kale and Lance. Lance is one of our worker owner of the hip hop smoothie shop. And the guy in the middle, he doesn't own anything. He's just, yeah. And this is the hip hop smoothie shop in action. And the lady on the right is Reverend Juju, Najuma Smith Pollard, and the lady on the left is Sister Helen Jones. Her son was beaten to death by the sheriff department about 12 years ago. And Reverend Juju's son was killed by another community member. So we are launching this campaign called We Must Love and Protect One Another. We have a hip-hop, conscious hip-hop conference coming up, a summit coming up on September 30th, where Reverend Juju will be speaking about her experiences with intra-community violence, and Sister Helen will be on the panel as well, talking about her experiences with the sheriff department when they beat her son. They beat him so bad they actually severed ligaments in his back, punctured his lungs, ruptured his spleen, and tried to cover it up. So a lot of these are issues that a lot of folks are uncomfortable dealing with. We ain't scared. We deal with them because we have to, right? We deal with them because we have to. That's it. I walked into a coffee shop yesterday and a lady asked me, she was trying to convert me to her faith. And she asked me, what would you do if you could change the world? What would you do if you had the power to change the world? And I said to her, I would make sure that everybody, all human beings, I wouldn't give human beings a choice. They would have to love each other. She goes, so you would make them robots? I said, yes. She was stuck. She didn't know where to go from there. And I was laughing because that was my way of trying to tell her, it's not gonna happen today, Mama. But that's our desire, right? That we must love and protect one another. So the issues we've discussed on the slides, how do we minimize the type of damage that's going on in the world? We see what's happening in Maui, right? We see the effects of climate change. We see what's happening with houselessness in this nation. It seems like we can't get a handle on any of it, can we? It seems like there's no hope. We're in the midst of distress. When you walk down the street and you see encampments everywhere, when 30% of the houseless population are using substance to cope with their predicament. Substance didn't drive them to the predicament. The issue happened first. And then many of them use substance to cope. And if you were there, you would do the same thing. And many of us have ways of coping in our own house, in our own shelter, behind closed doors that are not even healthy. So what's needed? How do we change this, y'all? I suggest two things: abolition and building new systems. Replace the old systems with new systems. But we must first be willing to abolish the old ones. You see, systemic change is needed. Old systems that produce harm needs to be abolished, and new systems of care must be created and implemented. Ecclesiastes in the Bible says, there's a time for everything under the sun. You guys remember that? Yeah. It says there's a time for every activity under the sun. There's a time to plant, there's a time to uproot, there's a time to kill, there's a time to heal, there's a time to weep, and there's a time to laugh, there's a time to mourn, and there's a time to dance, a time to scatter stones, and a time to gather them, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain, a time to search, and a time to give up the search, a time to tear things apart, and a time to bring them back together, a time to love and a time to hate. But he said there's a time to tear down and a time to build. That's what I want us to focus on. Is it time to tear down some of the old systems that we hold on to, some of the old systems of colonization? It's time for us to decolonize our minds and our society. Because a lot of those systems was not rooted in love. Jesus comes on the scene and he says, Ecclesiastes said there's a time to kill. Jesus comes on the scene and he says, you heard the old saying, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, love one another, love your enemies. I believe that Jesus ushered his disciples into a new phase, into a new time, so to speak. There's a time to live and a time to die. There's a time to kill. I believe Jesus was saying, no, there's a time to kill, but this is not the time. This is a new time. Time for peace. Because he said, love your enemy. But how do we achieve peace? I'm not talking about the type of peace without conflict. Because Dr. King says that peace without conflict, and I paraphrase it, is a bunch of bull. No such thing. Right? How can we achieve peace in a place where there's so much pain? Did you guys see pain enacted in Montgomery, Alabama? Did you see that? That was pain being unleashed. That's the same thing that happened here in 1992. When people carry a lot of trauma, all it takes is one spark. And boom. But how do we deal with this? 17 years ago, I said on August 11th at 7 p.m., we started the Church Without Walls in Skid Row so that we can learn what needed to be done in order to rebuild the city like Nehemiah. So now we sit on the wall with a weapon in one hand to protect ourselves from those who love the system, and a tool in our other hand to rebuild. We rebuild with love, abolition, or I should say abolition theology and liberation theology. Can I preach, Gail? Yeah. That's why not too long ago, we opened the Peace and Healing Center in Skid Row, where we provide where folks go in and we have a peace and healing room. People go in and they meditate, they pray, they relax. Where on Wednesdays, we've got the Healing Circle, Her Circle Book Club. On Thursdays, we have Off the Top Thursdays where we do healing through artistic expression. I wasn't last night, Gail, I wasn't there. And on the days when we're open, on days like we've been having this heat wave, folks from the streets can go into the Peace and Healing Center where there's AC. After they've been beaten by society and beaten by the elements, they can walk into the Peace and Healing Center and chill in the AC. We can give them an ice cold bottle of water, not room temperature, because y'all know, come on, when it's hot, you need a little cold. And so we are grateful that we can provide that for folks in Skid Row. They can come in and get a meal. We have snacks on a regular basis. Why? Because we want to house people and get them out of sight. That's not what we want to do in Skid Row. We are part of the community, and the people who live there are part of the community. We ain't trying to get people out of Skid Row. We're trying to get the folks who helped create Skid Row to undo what they've done. The people of Skid Row are not the problem. This is systemic and is going to continue to be until we abolish the systems that cause harm. That's easier said than done, though. Abolishing the system. You see, that's why we have the Hip Hop Smoothie Shop. It's a community-owned co-op. What are we saying? We're saying we want to create an alternative to capitalism. I understand it well, being part of a hip hop group where we had so many hip hop moguls, the Jay-Z's of the world. And we created so much through hip hop. Music, by the way, when we first started doing hip hop, grown folks would say to us, that ain't music, that's garbage. What do y'all do? That's garbage. That ain't music. But now it's the #1 selling music in the world. Created because Cindy Campbell, story of hip hop you never hear. Cindy Campbell, the sister of Kool Herc, who is the godfather of hip hop from Jamaica. They were Jamaican immigrants in the Bronx. Today, 50 years ago, August 11th, 1973, in the Bronx, threw a party so she could raise money for school clothes. You ever hear that story? So she could raise money for school clothes, threw the party, and out of it, Kool Herc, first person to ever mix 2 records, takes a James Brown record and extends the beat. And when you extend James Brown, you know you get funky. That was the birth of hip hop. Did you hear it was rooted in economics? First promoter of hip hop was Cindy Campbell. She never gets credit. So we are creating new systems. The hip hop, the co-op, cooperative is old. It's not a new concept, but it's not individualistic, so it doesn't have much legs. We don't commit to stuff like that because it's too communal. Individuals don't own it. Can I preach? And that was what happened to hip hop. It became so individualistic that the communities that Jay-Z comes from is still the same. When I was touring the world and signing autographs and doing all of that, my community was still the same. So we decided to start a cooperative where from the very beginning, community owners own it. Community members own it. And that's what the Hip Hop Smoothie Shop is all about. We also have a nonprofit coffee shop called Skid Row Coffee. So our Peace and Healing Center, Creating Justice LA Peace and Healing Center, serves as an incubator where community members can come, whether it's street vending or whatever you want to do, and gain the support. Innovation can happen in a place like Skid Row. Because the problem is everyone is trying to get people out of Skid Row. People in Skid Row need housing. They don't need to be displaced from their community. Because the community are the people. Right on. And I know that I could go on all day, but there may be questions. So I want to stop right there and ask, are there any questions or comments? So everyone can hear you.
My comment is it wonderful to hear truth in every word spoken?
Anybody else? Questions, comments?
Can you please explain what it means about being a member owner and how the mechanics work? Like, what's the buy-in, or is there a time commitment? And then how does that work in decision making?
So currently we are in that process right now. We're working with a co-op attorney. But basically how it works now is that for the cooperative, Creating Justice is the organization that actually, the Hip Hop Smoothie Shop was my idea a long time ago. I had it in 2006, right? And I wanted to do a hip hop smoothie shop called Gully Smoothies. You know, and it was a picture of a graffiti guy looking all yoked. Basically, I was a bodybuilder and a hip hopper, so I put the two together. But sitting on it since, and 3 years ago, we actually changed the name and launched it as the Hip Hop Smoothie Shop. But the way it works is that the organizations, there are A and B shares of the organization. And the organization that actually launches it is the B share. The workers are the A shares, which are the primary shares. There's a board, and the workers get to decide what happens when the profit comes in. How much resources goes back into the business, how much resources goes to paying those who are workers. Yeah, so they basically get to make all this decision. One member, one vote. So if you put in $1,000 and I put in $10,000, we still have the same power. So it's not based on capitalism. It's based on community. Now you may get other types of incentives for you for more if you put in more, maybe on a monetary basis, but in terms of power in the organization. And we're working, and that's the extent of what I know, because we're working currently with a co-op attorney to set up the entire structure. So once we get everything set up, I'd be happy to come back and explain.
What are your ideas on providing more housing right in Skid Row? I know there are warehouses and different things there.
Yeah, so there are 9,000 SROs in Skid Row. SROs are single residency occupancies, 9,000. So Skid Row is really the poorest community, one of the poorest communities in America, right? Because it's actually a community. Many of the people who are newly houseless folks just around the country are senior citizens. The fastest group of houseless folks. So for me, as someone of faith, when the scripture tells us to honor your mother and father, it seems like we're in for a rude awakening. It seems like this nation is headed towards a judgment if that's the way we're going to treat our elders, right? And so I believe we need to build more, not just housing, but housing with dignity. Single residency occupancies is just a room a little bigger than a jail cell. When it's hot, there's no AC. So people run to the streets because our elected officials simply care about getting the problem out of sight, out of mind. They don't care about we must love and protect one another. Right? Would you want to be in an SRO with no AC on a hot summer day here in Los Angeles? No, you wouldn't. So one of the things we can do, first of all, we have to build all over Los Angeles. That's the first thing, because we need 100,000 affordable housing units. We're 100,000 affordable housing units short in the state of California. So we just have to build the number one barrier for affordable housing is what? NIMBYism. Not in my backyard. If I know there are many people with many different faiths, but my faith tradition, if you are Jesus follower, I don't think you can be a NIMBY. If you are, you ain't following Jesus. You're following somebody else. I think you had a question. Yeah. Yeah, but we have to be a lot more creative in terms of building housing. We've got it. And by the way, we have a lot of housing in Los Angeles. It's just not affordable housing. And we have to stop building so many hotels, because what they're trying to do is make Los Angeles a tourist destination. It's already a tourist destination, but they're trying to make it even more that way. They don't care if people have to drive 2 hours away to come to work, right? I mean, it's the new slavery, right? It's cool. I mean, we don't really have to house them in the plantation anymore. Plantation capitalism, we can still get that money. We don't need to really care about them. We can just, have them drive 2 hours and breathe in all the toxins from traffic, all that stuff. We don't, at least it's legal. Go ahead.
Well, Pastor, first, thank you for 2 things, for all that you've said and done, but also for sharing with us a talent of my colleague Naomi that I didn't know existed, and I am now going to ask for permission and share the video that I made with all of our colleagues back in.
Yeah, I'm her manager, so see me after.
Yeah, she's got an agent, yeah. But I was wondering if you could say a little more about liberation theology, because I heard your point there. In seminary, I had the privilege of studying liberation theology, in particular Black liberation theology, James Cone, and I'm curious. That was kind of the limit of it. I'm curious how it's influenced you in your preaching, in your theology, and in your activism.
Yeah. So I think one of the texts that really influences me is when Jesus said, "Who the Son sets free is free indeed." Right. So for me, on a practical level, what we're doing is liberation theology, because we're trying to dismantle systems. By the way, liberation theology and abolition theology to me goes hand in hand, right? We're trying to dismantle systems that entangles people and create systems that causes folks to be able to be free, right? So Jesus walked on the scene and lived out liberation theology all day long when he healed the man who had been lame from birth. When he went into Samaria and met a woman at the well, Samaria, and right-wing evangelical Christians love to act like racism is not in the Bible. But Jesus went to Samaria, told his disciples, yo, you guys need to get out of here because you're misogynistic. Go get some food, because I'm about to go to Samaria and talk to a woman who's not supposed to be at the well. So Jesus is actually contributing to her breaking the law. Can I preach? And so he goes to Samaria and he talks to her. She goes, why are you talking to me? Your people have no dealings with our people. By the way, they were the same people. The Samaritans were just mixed. Right? And don't look at me like you're crazy, because we all do it. Light-skinned Black folks, right? We all do it, right? So Jesus walks in there and he says to her, she goes, your people have no dealings with my people. And he goes, listen, if you knew who it was that was asking you for a drink of water, you would have asked me and I would have given it to you. Meaning that not only do I care about the racism that you're encountering, I want you to live with me forever. You're invited into my space in eternity. He walks on, that's liberation theology. He walks in and saw religious men trying to stone a woman to death. She was caught in the very act of adultery, but none of the men she slept with were brought to be stoned. And that's what the letter of the law said. But they had the power. So they were going to kill her. Jesus walks on the scene and goes, he who's without sin cast the first stone. If he said this in this room, everybody would have to walk out, including myself. I dropped the mic. Be like, yo, I got sin, I gotta go. He set her free from a system that was about to execute her. Liberation theology. On the ground, practical. And more questions?
Thank you. When you talked about housing, I work at Alexandria House. And since the very beginning, part of our mission has been community. Recently, we bought the Kenmore residence from the Immaculate community for permanent supportive housing. It is affordable, truly affordable for the folks we serve that are currently unhoused. It also has air conditioning. Absolutely, you're right. But I guess the dream, and now I'm just speaking for myself, not from the agency, has been to have it be tenant owned, to have people pour money into rent and have nothing to show for it. So to have it be tenant owned. So I was wondering if you would share one of the first and second steps in the beginning of the hip hop smoothie shop. Like, what was one of the first steps you took to present or to create a hip hop smoothie shop? Because my dream is that we do that with Kenmore and other faith-based communities that are committed to tenant-owned, not condominiums, but tenant-owned property and places to live.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I think the first question is to invite the community in for a conversation. The people that we say that we're trying to serve, right? We invite the community in for a conversation about the hip hop smoothie shop, right? And because we're creating a space, right? And then not only do we invite them in, we invite them in to help shape the future of it, right? Not we're controlling everything. I like what you're talking in terms of housing, community ownership. Our next step, right, is to create a community land trust, right, where we can, as a nonprofit, pull housing from the system, because that's part of abolishing it. Someone said to me, I heard something somewhere one day where someone said, if you want to make an old system obsolete, build a new one. Or if you want to make an old car obsolete, build a new model. You ever drove up the lot with a brand new car and then you see the new version, you're like, I should have waited a year later, right? So we have to, and by the way, Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers. You want to know how we make peace? People of faith, or just people in general, have to become peacemakers. And how do we become peacemakers? We break down old systems and we use our own creativity, like Alexandria House or the Hip Hop Smoothie Shop, to build new systems that's more inviting for folks. I think she had a question. And then
Thank you, thank you, thank you. There's hope in this room.
everybody in this room.
I'm interested, you mentioned that as part of what Judy was asking about, and the first steps, you either became or are becoming a nonprofit.
We're already a nonprofit. We have
So-
two nonprofits, Church Without Walls and Creating Justice. Now, the reason we Creating Justice, but Creating Justice just launched a Peace and Healing Center. And the reason, and we got the Peace and Healing Center through a grant with the Los Angeles Civil Rights Department.
So it was a choice to become a nonprofit.
Yeah, it's always been a choice, only because, and that's part of the system, by the way.
Right.
Sometimes you need the system as a bridge to move to the next place.
So that was my question about,
All right, there you go.
thank you.
Said something.
Well, I went it with Judy. I did a buying club and a welfare mothers' right in Cabrini Green back in 1976. And I started because it was I was the director of a common pantry that was interfaith in that neighborhood. And that gave me access to, I had to go out and get people to donate to the salary. But what happened was I raised enough money and all of the volunteers were people coming in. I got those to be the volunteers, people. And then I could go to big market in Chicago and buy potatoes and tomato, all of those things. I could give them away to the people that came, but then I took all of the extra over to the welfare right funders. And they could have it as a way of getting income for their welfare rights group. So I've been a co-operator all my life. And so the pedagogy of your press, which if we are here today now being sparked, it strikes me that if you have people that can pay the rent, then the folks that have believed in profit and have more money than they need to look and see, you need to hear a sermon where you open up the gospel, but they need to see that they need to look and invest, not to make money, but for the impact it will make, and pay the down payment of the mortgage, so that the ownership is given by an investment with those who have. It's not a donation to charity. People have to stop thinking that they only give when they get money something back for themselves.
Great point. Great point, because that's one of the principles.
And I think I really do believe we're at a point where we are with the first fellow that came about the climate resolve, that people, and hear this Maui thing, people are starting to understand this isn't going to go away. And it's not going to go away if we wait till it's a charitable thing or somebody else is going to do it. And this seems like, Judith, your history makes owning the Kenmore place very believable to good people that don't know how to break that pattern of the profit.
And I would like to say, the community land trust and Alexandria House is the bridge to community ownership. Means we have to create systems now that where individuals can now begin to own, right? Just like we're trying to, we love street vendors because it's the only way to deal with the huge corporations, right? We should be launching, everyone, it puts everyone and makes everyone able to express their value in the community. No matter what it is that they're doing, they're able to express their value. And so I think what we're doing is just a step. Where we're trying to get to is where we can distribute or allow the community to take hold of those resources. By the way, I'm okay with charity, but I don't like it, right? Because I would rather have equity than have charity. If we had equity, we wouldn't need as much charity as we have today. But equity requires some folks releasing some power and some resources.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you. I work at Alexander House, and over the years, when I give tours, I'm really clear to talk about not the lack of housing, but the lack of affordable housing, and that's now part of the narrative. But you gave me a gift today because the community of Skid Row is a new concept, because everybody wants it cleaned up and out of sight and off my conscience. And presenting it as you did is, to your point, to invest in this underserved community, not erase it. So thank you for really, really creating a very visual, visceral, and emotional response of me to what you do at Skid Row. Thank you.
And I think it's important for us to recognize the people who are underground and working with people. I think about Reggie and the work you guys do, right? That's the work. You're walking with people, you're mentoring people, right? And so economically, you can do that as well. See, what Skid Row needs is folks to come and walk with folks, right? We don't need folk to come in like stealth bombs and be saviors, right? But we need folks to come walk with folks. Because the truth is, I don't have the capacity to walk for nobody. I don't have the capacity to walk for anyone or to live for anyone. I only have the capacity to assist. That's why I want folks to own their own stuff. Which should have happened after the Great Migration. But instead of 40 acres and a mule, I wish I could preach tonight or today. Somebody gave sharecropping, but there was no equity.
Thank you for everything you've been sharing. A couple things for the people here. I've been putting my money into Calvert Impact Capital. And they give you they give you more, they used to give you more interest than 0.1%. And what they do is take your money and use it for women, for affordable housing, all sorts of things like that. So that's an alternative way to put your money to work so that it does do good projects for the world. The other thing is, I was thinking more on, I know we need to build more housing, but the mayor and everybody keeps saying there's only, we can't do it quickly. So what about in Skid Row? Could we put toilets on every block? Could we put water on every block that's, for wash stands? I see them in Echo Park in Alvarado Street, is it? Near one of the overpasses. So they've got a wash station and they've got toilets there, but I don't think they have them on every block in Skid Row. I've driven through and walked through sometimes.
Yeah. Since the UN came, we've got more toilets in Skid Row. But toilets on every block in Skid Row is not going to solve the issue, right? Because we have some folks in Skid Row who are mentally ill. The most important thing for Skid Row is for more situations like the Peace and Healing Center. Let me give you I like to go practical because we have a lot of them. In 17 years, we got a lot of practical examples. So last week, there's an alley right behind where we just got the Peace and Healing Center, and someone who's in the community who medicating herself in her own way. She sits at the door right next to our place, and every time I would clean the alley, I would see human feces, right? So I pick it up, whatever, put it in the trash, whatever. Nobody knows this. Not even Kayla doesn't know this. So I went to her. I said, do you know who's, I had the broom in my hand. I was just finished cleaning. I go, you know who's using the restroom? She goes, it's me. I go, there's a restroom right there on that corner. So I would appreciate it if you could use the one in the restroom. Can you do me that favor? She goes, yeah. She goes, I just couldn't get to the restroom. I said, I get it. And I just couldn't get to the restroom. This was last Monday. She hasn't used that alley to do her business since last Monday. And I'm not talking about last month, I'm talking Monday before that. The human connection, being in community with people is important. And knowing how to do it with compassion. Kale.
I think one of the biggest fights you're probably gonna come up with is changing the mentality. I'm just new from master's in architecture, so I've been dealing with, actually have a project at Skid Row. And I was trying to convince my teachers how important community is, because community is in everybody's mouth, right? Oh, community, but community means something different than providing an extra room for people to meet. It means actually being there, it means actually building something, it means actually building around a human being rather than just building to look good so that you have, and there's a huge problem in this in my field. People build so they look good, so that it's good for them, for their image. They forget that a human has to live there,
You said a
and
lot.
that they need certain things within. as you mentioned, air conditioning, which is certainly something important, but also a really good housing unit is difficult to build and it's expensive. So I believe that we are, especially because I come from Italy, so it's a different mentality. And here it's all work, 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 and we forget that less is more,
Come on
that
now.
if you have less is actually a better life. And we just forget that we need to communicate with each other and be with each other more than being at work.
Come on.
You
come
know,
on.
so, and I think that's the fight, the real fight, you know, because all countries are going towards the way the US thinks, work, 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 20 hours a day, and you forget that you have a child, that you have a life, that you have a husband, that you have friends that you can't meet and see because you don't have the time. I think that's ridiculous. And in our school, they always say thoughtful design. Yeah, you gotta need time to think, though, otherwise, if I rush through everything, how am I gonna get a thoughtful drawing? You know, and it was like funny because I'm running, I'm like, I haven't thought about what I'm drawing, you know, what is it that I'm doing actually? So I think I really like the fact that all these ideas are coming together, and I think it's the right time for it to actually work out. Because I think, as you said, money is actually tiring us out. And I think that time is actually what we're looking for, you know? So I hope I'll be part of this and that we will succeed in this change of life, because it's a change of lifestyle, really.
Somebody get that woman a hand. I'm talking. That's the word. Yeah, yeah. Yes, Caleb. How I look at the times. Yeah. Yeah, I'll have Caleb, I'll ask Caleb, ask for anything. He knows. Go ahead, Caleb.
All right. First off, don't we love Pastor Q? I love Pastor Q. That's the only time you'll hear me say that because I give him a hard time most often.
All day long,
All day long, every day.
like vice versa.
But I just want to say something briefly because I can talk, but what I will say is 5 years ago, 6 years ago is when I met Pastor Q, and I was 125 pounds heavier than I am today, depressed, in rehab, living in an SRO. But I had been a storied musician my whole life. Detroit built something incredible. Detroit's still going, amazing. And I know that everybody's giving me the shocked face. But the truth is, I was always the same person. I was going through a hard time. The people are not the condition. I will say it again. The people are not the condition. The people are the people. And we have stopped seeing people. We want to see our places so neat and so nice because it allows us to ignore, right? It allows us to pretend it's all fancy. Everything you see somebody going through on the street that you judge them for is something you've gone through in your home, that you have 4 walls to cover, right? I know because I lived a life at 4 had these ego pursuits that led me to collapse, depression, skid row. And then I met Pastor Q and started playing at church on Fridays. And it started a healing process. I started to listen and say, oh, wait a minute, this is where I'm supposed to be. Then I realized that that Dark of the Soul journey was exactly what I needed to see myself in the way I looked at folks before too, perhaps. When I would go into the same places I had performed at and they would give me the look like, why are you here? What are you doing in these clothes? Right? And so I just wanted to just give that gravity, right? Not to say it's because the story is triumphant, right? I was so grateful to help with Pastor Q opening this center, which to me is a center of innovation, as you said. But what's most beautiful about this center is that there have already been community connections, people who are coming in who are just like me. I can recognize the people, and they live in SROs in Skid Row, and they live on the street in Skid Row, and they're just waiting for that human connection Pastor Q just talked about. It's so much easier, believe it or not, to get somebody to understand something if you just have a conversation. If you just talk to them, not here are the rules, right? Do we respond well? No. And so my thing is, I want you to support, and I want you to tell your friends to support this innovation. It's an innovation, it's a gift to community. And I want you to support what Pastor Q is doing, because I was in Skid Row for many years, 4 or 5 years, 6 years. And I didn't get my full healing until I moved out. But what I will say is it allowed me to make sure that every single time I can, I serve that community. My mom just passed away. And she passed away on Thursday night late. And I talked to my sister, and I was preparing to get on a flight right away. And my sister was like, wait a minute, remember it's Friday. And on Friday nights, you have service at the Row. And Mom would not want you to miss service at the Row. My mother watched the service at the Row every Friday night. Because of all the things that I did and accomplished, Carnegie Hall, Kennedy Center, traveling across the world, she said that she saw my most authentic soul and self every Friday night, and that inspired her. That inspired her. So I'm grateful my mother got to see me come full circle to really loving people, right? To really loving myself enough to do the work on myself. That's why this healing center is so important. You gotta heal. You gotta heal. We gotta heal people. We gotta use a move of love. The money ain't gonna work. Nothing will work. The love, people seeing each other again. That's it.
Man, man, I thank God for KO every day. It's Naomi and the entire team, Lance, and I could just go on and on, Kay, on and on and on. Because these are folks who get it and really care about people. If you guys would like to support what we do, then you can talk to Kale. But there's one thing I like to say about when you support us. We got, I think, our first donation that really made an impact in the community from just everyday people. And then we got a donation from Chris Rock that allowed us to push. But those donations don't come every day. I think the most important donations we get are the people who say, I want to give you something, but I also want to support you on a regular basis, right? I think those are the things that keep us going. Those are people who say, I don't have much, but I'll give this monthly, right? And it's not for me, because I tell people I would rather you partner with us than just to give us something. And then, yeah, with the Hip Hop Smoothie Shop, example of the way we do our pay structure with the Hip Hop Smoothie Shop. Actually, right now, every time a smoothiologist or mixologist goes out, when we do our pop-ups, when we do an event, this smoothiologist gets paid $20 an hour, right? Right now. And if they work for 2 hours, we pay them for 5. It's just we just think about people and the amount of time it takes in Los Angeles to get things done, and traveling, and the amount of time you lose, right? So we factor in all those things and make sure that folks have what they need. And our goal and hope is that we'll be able to hire a lot of the people who are coming through the center, because there are people right now who are working in the center for free, and I'd like to be able to pay them. Right, to work. So that's just some of the stuff we're doing. We're going to get the resources. If you guys would like to be part of that, blessings to you. Thank you, guys.